Have you ever felt completely overwhelmed by how divided the world is today? And, wondered why we can't even agree on basic fundamental facts anymore?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's exhausting,
It
right?
really is. But what if I told you that the root of all these global conflicts, the wars, the political polarization, what if it isn't actually about a fight over money or land or even politics?
Okay, so what is it about?
Well, what if it's because we fundamentally misunderstand what it means for a fish to exist?
A fish. Okay, I mean, that sounds completely absurd on the surface. We are so conditioned to view human conflict through this lens of tangible resources, right? Like who controls this oil field or who governs that territory.
Exactly, the stuff you can touch.
Right. But when you strip away the politics and look at the absolute psychological bedrock of why human beings fight, you find an epistemological crisis. We literally just don't share the same reality.
And that is our mission for this deep dive.
Mhm.
We are unpacking a truly massive framework from a collection of philosophical essays by the author Xiaoyan Lin. And interestingly, these are framed as being written in the summer of 2026. So we're looking at a slightly speculative, futuristic text that attempts to completely redefine our core concepts of God, of faith, and, well, existence itself.
Lin is incredibly ambitious here. I mean, he's putting forward the argument that humanity is currently trapped in a cycle of logical contradictions. And his main thesis is that a scientifically grounded understanding of what he calls natural law is basically the only viable path to achieving true global peace.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Because to understand why the world is so divided, Lin demands that we start at the absolute bottom layer of reality.
Right.
We have to ask, what does it actually mean for something to exist?
And to answer that, Lin kind of sidesteps traditional philosophy and takes us straight into modern physics.
Right.
Think about the universe through the lens of Einstein's famous equation, E equals mc squared.
Which proves that matter and energy are interchangeable.
Exactly. At its most fundamental subatomic level, the universe is essentially just a massive swirling pool of energy.
I mean, an atom is what, like 99.9% empty space?
Yeah.
It's just this soup of particles and waves?
Yeah, exactly. The solid table in front of you, the air you're breathing, it is all just a fluctuating energy pool.
Hmm.
So in this vast continuous field, how do we as human beings perceive individual things?
Like separate objects.
Right. Lin argues that without a concept's definition installed in our minds, nothing actually exists to us. We only perceive distinct items because we have defined them beforehand. And he illustrates this with this great analogy about a fish.
Oh, I want to hear this because the idea that a fish doesn't exist until I define it sounds like a riddle.
It does, but imagine you are standing on the bank of a river. Physically, objective reality is just a complex interaction of energy and matter, photons of light bouncing off water molecules, kinetic energy.
Just physics doing its thing.
Right. Now imagine you do not have the defined concept of a fish in your mind. You have never ever learned what a cold-blooded aquatic animal with gills and fins is.
So I have literally no mental category for it.
None at all. In that scenario, Lin says you cannot possibly know if a fish exists in that river. You might see a flash of silver. You might notice a sudden ripple on the surface.
But I won't see a fish.
Exactly. You will just see water behaving strangely. The fish only exists to you as a distinct entity because you possess the definition of it to map onto those sensory inputs.
Oh, wow. I love that. It's like having a computer file without the right software to open it.
That's a perfect way to put it, yeah.
Like the raw data, the ones and zeros, are all sitting there on the hard drive.
Yeah.
But without the software, the concept, you can't see the picture. The screen just shows meaningless code.
That is a phenomenal way to look at it. The raw data is the universal energy pool. The software is the concept. And this biological filtering applies to literally everything you see, hear, or feel. Lin points to the example of a peacock feather.
Wait, what happens with the feather?
So when you look at a peacock feather, you perceive these incredibly vibrant, iridescent blues and greens, right?
Yeah, it looks like it's painted with heavy pigment.
But structurally, under a microscope, there is no blue or green pigment in that feather at all.
Wait, really? It's an optical illusion.
It is entirely structural. The feather is made of microscopic nanostructures shaped to reflect very specific wavelengths of light while absorbing others. The color green doesn't actually exist on the bird.
It exists entirely in my brain.
Exactly. Your brain is interpreting that specific wavelength of light hitting your retina and assigning the concept of green to that electrical signal.
So our brains are constantly constructing our reality based on the definitions we carry around. But here's where I want to push back a little.
Go for it.
How does this epistemological deep dive relate to global conflicts or religion? Because Lynn takes this idea of definitions creating existence and applies it directly to the concept of God.
He does, yeah.
So is he suggesting that atheists are basically just lacking the software to see God?
That is the absolute core of his argument regarding atheism, yes. He suggests that atheists aren't necessarily denying reality, they simply lack the concept of God as Lynn defines it.
As Lynn defines it. Okay, that's a big caveat.
Right, and this is the crucial pivot. Lynn does not define God as some humanoid figure sitting on a cloud passing judgment. He draws heavily on the philosophy of Spinoza, defining God as the ultimate creator, which is natural law itself.
See, I have to jump in here because if I drop an apple, it falls because of gravity. Calling gravity God feels a bit like, I don't know, a semantic parlor trick. Why use that specific historically loaded word? Why not just call it physics?
And that's a totally fair critique. It's actually why Spinoza was excommunicated back in the 17th century for these exact ideas. But Lynn uses the term God because of its functional weight.
What do you mean by functional weight?
Well, think about the traditional function of a creator. It's the source from which all things originate. It is the omnipresent force that governs how everything behaves, and it dictates the ultimate fate of the cosmos.
Okay, I see where you're going.
Right. The laws of nature, gravity, quantum mechanics, thermodynamics, evolution, they undeniably fulfill that exact role. They created us, they sustain us, they govern us.
So they are the operating system of the universe.
Yes. And because natural laws undeniably exist, Lynn argues this natural God undeniably exists. The atheist looks at the universe, sees the elegant laws of nature, and stops there.
Whereas Lynn looks at the universe, sees those same laws, and says, that is the creator. That is God.
Exactly. The atheist just doesn't map that specific definitional software onto the data.
Okay, that makes sense. It elevates science from just measuring things to uncovering the fundamental architecture of existence.
Exactly.
But if God is simply the undeniable laws of nature, then the way humanity has approached religion for the last few millennia has been, well, fundamentally backward.
Completely backward. Lynn offers a very sharp critique of traditional religions. He specifically points to the histories of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, which have historically demanded that followers believe in God's existence first, as a prerequisite.
Without needing to fully understand the mechanisms of that existence, like demanding blind faith.
Yes. And Lynn argues that demanding belief before understanding makes faith incredibly fragile. It makes it unconvincing in the modern empirical world because it isn't grounded in verifiable reality. It becomes a house of cards.
Right, so what's the alternative then?
For Lynn, true faith must be built on understanding. And understanding requires the rigorous application of logic, philosophy, and science.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because Lynn uses some vivid examples from Asian folk religions to illustrate the fragility of this blind, speculative belief. Can you walk us through those?
Yeah, he contrasts two very telling stories about speculative belief, which is basically belief based solely on desired outcomes. In the first story, a businessman prays to a Buddha statue, asking for his new venture to succeed.
Okay.
And the business happens to boom, so the man returns to the temple and paints the entire statue in solid gold.
The handsome reward for services rendered, I guess.
Right, but then Lynn contrasts this with a gambler. The gambler prays to a similar Buddha statue, asking to win a fortune. He goes to the tables and loses absolutely everything.
Oh.
Yeah. In a rage, the gambler returns to the temple, ties a thick rope around the Buddha statue's neck, and literally drags it through the dirt through the entire village.
Wow. That is a brutal image. But it completely exposes the mindset, doesn't it? That isn't faith. It's a mercenary contract.
Exact.
It's a cosmic protection racket. Like, I pay you in praise and incense, and you pay me in lottery winnings. And if the check bounces, I fire you or drag you through the mud.
It reveals that the gambler didn't have faith in a higher power at all. He only had an expectation of a transaction. And that is the danger of speculative belief. It relies entirely on short-term outcomes.
So if a tragedy strikes like an illness or something, it shatters.
Because the machine didn't give you the candy you paid for. True faith, according to Lynn, isn't about demanding miracles or predicting the future to your personal advantage.
So what is it then?
It's about a deep structural understanding of natural law, which means accepting that the universe operates on consistent, discoverable rules, even when those rules result in outcomes you personally dislike.
Which implies that science isn't the enemy of faith, right? Science is actually the highest form of it.
Yes. Without a foundational faith that the universe operates on consistent rules, Scientists wouldn't even have the motivation to do research.
That's a great point. If you thought the universe was just random chaos governed by, I don't know, unpredictable spirits, why would you bother trying to calculate the trajectory of a planet?
You wouldn't. Science intrinsically requires faith in natural law.
Okay, I followed the logic here. Science uncovers natural law is the creator, and understanding that is true faith. But this brings up a massive paradox for me.
What's that?
If we all live in the exact same physical universe, governed by the exact same natural laws, why on earth has religion caused so much bloodshed and division throughout human history?
And this is where Lin points out a massive foundational logical contradiction at the heart of global conflict. Think about the major traditional religions. They all claim that their specific, culturally defined God is the sole creator of the universe.
Right, they all claim exclusive rights to the title.
Logically, that is impossible. It is entirely self-contradictory. If religion A claims its God is the sole creator of everything, then religion B's God cannot also be the sole creator.
Because if one is true, the others must logically be false.
Exactly. Or else they are claiming that their God was created by the other God, which completely invalidates the concept of a sole creator.
So where do all these competing gods come from, if not from the universe itself?
Lin argues that these multiple conflicting gods are entirely man-made. They are cultural constructs created historically due to the unequal distribution of power.
So you're saying it was a deliberate political strategy?
Lin views it that way, yeah. Secular and religious leaders throughout history took the one unified natural God, the actual observable laws of the universe, and deliberately fractured it.
Why? To keep power.
Exactly. They split into competing, personalized deities to control their populations, to claim divine right to rule, and to hoard resources. Lin doesn't just call this a mistake, he calls this deliberate fracturing the ultimate offense to God.
Because they are taking the unified truth of the universe and chopping it up for political leverage. But how does this logical breakdown actually lead to a physical war?
Well, when societies have fundamentally incompatible logic about who the creator is and what the creator wants, they lose the ability to debate on an elevated, rational plane. The shared definitional software is just gone.
So the conflict evolves.
Exactly. Instead of a philosophical disagreement, it becomes an animalistic, win-take-all brawl over territory, resources, and power. Lin breaks down modern conflicts impartially into categories like religion versus religion, faith versus non-faith, and non-faith versus non-faith.
And in every case, when that logic of a shared natural law breaks down, humans just revert to their evolutionary hardware.
We do.
We act like wolves fighting over a carcass.
But that leads us directly into a historical deep dive Lin takes, which I found fascinating because it shows how humanity eventually tried to crawl out of that animalistic state.
Ah, yes. The judicial duels. Right. Trial by combat. Now, you have to put yourself in the shoes of someone living in, like, the 10th century. There is no forensic science.
No DNA testing, no fingerprinting.
No CCTV footage.
Yeah.
It is literally just one person's word against another's. If I accuse you of stealing my cattle, how does the village know who is telling the truth?
The judicial system was essentially powerless in the face of conflicting testimonies without witnesses, so rather than just letting the two parties fight for dominance the way animals fight over mating rights, humans introduced a theological element into the violence.
Okay, so they still fought, but
They fought believing that God would actively intervene in the physical world to grant victory to the righteous party.
so a duel wasn't just a fight to the death. It was officially recognized as a judgment of God.
Exactly. And to you and me today, trial by combat seems barbaric. It seems like the height of ignorance. But Lin synthesizes this beautifully. Historically, it was actually a massive step forward for civilization.
See, I really struggled with that idea. How is hitting each other with broadswords a step forward?
Because it was the beginning of humanity trying to fight for a concept of right and wrong, not just survival. It was a clumsy, violent attempt to align human disputes with a higher moral order.
So even though the method was deeply flawed, it introduced the abstract concept of justice into physical violence. They were seeking truth, not just dominance.
Right. They were essentially using swords as a medieval polygraph test. They genuinely believed the laws of physics would bend to protect the innocent.
But of course, the laws of physics do not bend.
No, they don't. A physically strong, highly trained, guilty knight will almost always defeat a weak, untrained, innocent farmer. Gravity and kinetic energy do not care about your innocence.
And the church eventually realized the severe theological problem with this, right? The Fourth Lateran Council in 1215.
Exactly. The church essentially issued a decree stating that humans cannot force God to perform miracles on demand to solve our petty legal disputes. They recognize that natural law is consistent.
You cannot demand it be suspended just because you were in the right. But Lynn makes a brilliant point that we still suffer from the hangover of this medieval mindset today, don't we? Like, we subconsciously still think whoever wins a conflict must be morally right.
It is a deeply ingrained cognitive bias. We equate military victory or massive wealth or corporate success with moral righteousness. We assume the winner of a war must have been on the right side of history, as if God handed them the victory.
Which is a very dangerous trap.
Very dangerous. In the physical world governed by natural law, victory often just means you had better weapons, better logistics, or more capital. It does not mean you possessed the moral high ground.
Okay, so if duels and violence are terrible ways to find the truth, and if blind belief leads to fragile faith and animalistic brawls, what is the alternative? How do we build a society that doesn't rely on violence to settle disputes?
According to Lin, the absolute cornerstone of a highly developed modern society is what he calls the spirit of contract.
The spirit of contract. This might be Lynn's most profound connection.
I agree. To understand the gravity of a contract, we have to look at what it actually requires from human beings. First, a contract requires independent individuals with free will.
Oh.
You must have the cognitive ability to make choices, and crucially, you must have the capacity to bear the consequences of those choices.
Right. Because if an authoritarian government dictates your job, your salary, and where you live, you aren't engaging in contracts. You are just following orders.
Exactly. Furthermore, if someone holds a weapon to your head and forces you to sign a document, that is not a contract. That is coercion. A true contract requires freedom. But here is where faith comes into play. No human being can see the future.
True.
So when you sign a contract promising to deliver goods next month, or you sign a mortgage promising to pay a bank for the next 30 years, you are making a massive leap into the unknown.
But, I mean, playing devil's advocate here. Do I really need faith to sign up? I just need a steady job and a good lawyer.
But think about what your lawyer relies on. Your lawyer relies on a judicial system, which relies on a stable society, which relies entirely on the assumption that the natural laws of the universe will remain consistent tomorrow.
Oh, I see.
Signing a contract is fundamentally an act of trust in natural law. You are having faith that the laws of physics, economics, agriculture, and human behavior will remain stable enough for you to fulfill your promise.
So you are projecting predictability onto the future based on your understanding of natural law.
Yes, and this is why Lin argues that groups with faith in this consistent, discoverable natural law are the absolute cornerstone driving human social development.
Because they're the ones who have the courage to make promises about the future.
Exactly. And more importantly, they have the courage to take responsibility when they fail, rather than blaming capricious gods or marginalized groups or surrendering their free will to some authoritarian power to keep them safe.
So the spirit of contract is basically the ultimate manifestation of understanding natural law. Which brings us to the ultimate question. Where does humanity go from here? What is the future in Lin's 2026 framework?
Well, Lin's conclusion is that the future direction of humanity is actually quite clear. We must unify our thoughts under the faith of one natural God, the objective reality of natural law.
Ideological unification.
Right. By establishing this fundamental scientific consensus about what existence is and what rules govern the universe, we can finally eliminate the logical contradictions that drive global conflicts.
This sounds like an unimaginably difficult sociological task, though, getting the entire globe on the same definitional software.
It is massive. But interestingly, Lin points out that artificial intelligence might actually be the key here. He suggests that AI will help us process these vast cultural differences and ultimately help unify human thought under this belief in a natural God.
Oh, wow. So AI isn't just a tech tool. It's like a definitional translator to help us find objective truth.
Exactly. It helps establish that shared reality. And we actually see attempts at this all the time, even without AI. Lin looks at geopolitical agreements, like the Abraham Accords in the Middle East, for example.
Right.
And maintaining strict political neutrality here, he views these kinds of treaties as attempts to bridge those massive ideological and definitional gaps. They are attempts to construct a shared reality where contracts can finally replace combat.
It is the arduous process of replacing the animalistic brawl with the spirit of contract. And if you think about it, we participate in this grand philosophical experiment every single day.
We really do.
When you sign an employment agreement, when you sign a lease for a new apartment, or even when you just promise to meet a friend for coffee at 3 p.m. tomorrow, you are exercising a profound level of faith.
Absolutely. You are trusting in natural law, trusting in the stability of human civilization, and stepping into the unknown future, taking responsibility for your actions.
It truly is the invisible glue holding the modern world together. We have covered some incredible ground today. We started by looking at a river and realizing that without the concept of a fish, the fish cannot exist in our minds.
Right.
We explored Spinoza's natural God, realizing that the laws of physics and biology serve the ultimate function of a creator. We traced the bloody evolution of medieval duels where humans desperately tried to force God to be a judge.
And finally, arrived at the spirit of contract, the true engine of human progress built on faith and understanding. It is a remarkable journey from the quantum energy pool to the very foundation of human society.
It really is.
And, it leaves us with something quite profound to consider regarding how we communicate with each other.
I think so too. Lynn argues that every word we speak is ultimately just a flawed attempt to describe the highly subjective electrical signals bouncing around in our own individual brains.
Yeah, because of our different definitions, I can never truly know if the green I see when I look at a peacock feather is the exact same green you see.
We are all, in a very real sense, trapped in our own isolated biological virtual realities.
It's a slightly terrifying thought, but yes.
Right. And if we really are just isolated brains sitting in the dark of our skulls trying to transmit flawed signals to one another through language, perhaps the true miracle in this universe isn't a burning bush or parting a sea or proving whose historical God is the real one.
What is the true miracle, then?
Maybe the real miracle is the fact that two human beings, trapped in their own biological virtual realities, can never understand each other just enough to sit down, look each other in the eye, and sign a contract in the first place.
Wow, that is a beautiful and provocative thought to leave on.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it gives you some new definitions to work with as you look at the world and maybe a new appreciation for the next contract you sign. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and we'll catch you next time.